The hull of the Galactic Defense Academy was built to frighten even the bravest warriors. With its high black walls, harsh white lights, and metal floor marked by scars from old battles and tests that had gone wrong. And on this day it was filled with hundreds of cadets from across the galaxy, each one trained for war and chosen from the strongest of their kind. Some tall and armored by nature, others covered in scales or thick fur, some glowing with strange energy, all of them standing in rigid lines while fear hung in the air like smoke. Because they all knew why they were here and what would happen next. And when the massive doors at the far end of the hall opened with a deep crushing sound, silence fell instantly as the war beast entered, a creature so old and powerful that legend said it had fought before many star systems were even formed, its 6 heavy legs striking the floor with slow certainty, its body covered in dark hardened skin that looked like burned steel, marked with glowing scars that told stories of battles no one remembered, its eyes calm and cold, not wild like an animal but sharp like a thinking general. And everyone knew this beast was not trained to attack but to judge, because once every cycle it was released to choose a commander worthy of bonding with it, a bond that could decide the fate of wars. And as it moved forward, it lowered its massive head and began to sniff each cadet one by one, breathing in their scent, their fear, their strength, their lies, rejecting many with a simple turn of its head and frightening others so badly that they trembled or collapsed, while instructors watched without emotion because this test was final. And at the very end of the long line stood Ethan Cross, the only human in the room, smaller than nearly everyone else, without claws or natural armor or glowing power, wearing a plain uniform that showed wear and repair, his hands steady at his sides even though his heart was pounding hard enough to hurt, because he knew humans were still seen as weak newcomers by the galaxy, useful but never respected, survivors of a damaged homeworld. And when the war beast finally reached him, the air felt heavy and tight as the creature leaned close, its massive nose almost touching his chest as it sniffed him slowly, deeply, once and then again. And Ethan felt fear rise but did not move or reach for a weapon or try to show dominance, instead remembering lessons learned not in academies but in broken colonies and lost battles, lessons about patience, about standing firm without shouting. And slowly he lowered himself to one knee, not to beg and not to surrender, but to show calm respect, and the war beast froze, its breathing stopping for a long moment before it slowly lowered its huge body and sat directly in front of the human, releasing a deep sound from its chest that echoed through the hall and was recognized instantly by every expert present as a bond call, a sound that meant choice, and shock spread through the room as officers, cadets, and observers realized what had happened, because never before had the war beast chosen someone like this, someone so physically small, someone human. And as the creature's eyes met Ethan's, there was no hunger or threat in them, only recognition, as if it had found something familiar and strong beneath the fragile surface. And in that moment the balance of the galaxy shifted quietly, because far beyond the Academy walls ancient forces that watched for signs of change felt something new stir, something stubborn and dangerous, and without a single shot fired or word spoken, humanity had taken its first true step into the center of galactic destiny. The galaxy did not remain quiet for long, and 6 months after the war beast had chosen Ethan Cross, a new threat appeared from the darkness beyond known space, something alive and terrible. A swarm of ships grown from flesh and bone, the devouring swarm, moving through the void like a storm of living metal and hunger, consuming entire star systems without mercy, their numbers vast, their strategy driven only by the will to destroy. And when they reached the edges of human-controlled space, alarms blared across the Galactic Council and fleets were immediately dispatched to stop them. But even the largest armadas were no match, ships were torn apart in moments. Entire squadrons vanished into fire and debris. Worlds burned, and panic spread faster than light signals. Because no species had survived the swarm for long enough to understand its patterns. And the Council turned desperately to the vanguard forces, including the newly bonded Warbeast and Ethan Cross, whose name had become known quietly among commanders as someone both daring and unpredictable. And Ethan now stood on the bridge of the Aegis, a massive warship equipped with experimental weapons and reinforced armor. The Warbeast beside him linked directly to the ship's systems, its massive form pressing against the deck as it adjusted cannons and shield nodes with movements that were part instinct, part intelligence, and every sensor on the ship screamed with incoming threats. Enemy formations moving in intricate patterns that seemed chaotic but were actually precise, like hunting predators circling for the kill. And Ethan's mind raced as he studied the readings, noticing small weaknesses no one else had caught. The way the swarm left gaps near the spine ships, the massive vessels that coordinated their packs, and when the first wave of attackers slammed into the fleets, the bridge shook violently, lights flickered, alarms screamed, and officers from alien worlds froze or panicked. But Ethan stayed calm, issuing orders clearly and swiftly, telling pilots to hold formation, directing gunners to fire on weak points, rerouting power to shields and engines, while the Warbeast responded instantly to his commands, launching itself into space to strike enemy vessels directly, tearing apart command ships with claws and cannons, moving with terrifying speed and precision that made the swarm hesitate, even if only for a moment. And in those moments, Ethan saw opportunity, coordinating attacks across multiple sectors, taking advantage of the creature's pack instincts against them, while explosions painted the void with fire and shards of metal, screams echoing in com channels as ships and crews were destroyed. And yet, despite the chaos, the swarm adapted quickly, sending dread organisms that could pierce armor and devour ships from the inside, one crashing into the Aegis with a violent tremor that threw Ethan across the bridge, cutting systems and causing fires to rage down the corridors, smoke filling the air as alarms continued to wail. And for a moment, it seemed they might be lost. But the bond between human and beast was stronger than any fear, stronger than pain, and Ethan forced himself up, tasting blood but seeing clearly through the chaos, knowing that the only chance was to act boldly, to overload the Aegis core and use the ship as a weapon from inside the enemy lines, a tactic no one had dared try, but his calculations showed it could shatter the pack and turn the tide. And when he reached the control station, the Warbeast pressed its massive head to his shoulder in recognition, a silent understanding passing between them, and together they initiated the sequence, diverting all energy into a single massive surge, the Aegis glowing with unstable power as it charged directly into the densest portion of the swarm. Enemy ships attempting to strike it down, beams and missiles tearing into its hull. But Ethan's control of the energy shield kept the ship intact just long enough to reach the center. And then the explosion, a white sun blooming in the dark space, engulfing dozens of swarm vessels at once, scattering the rest in confusion, their coordinated attacks broken, their numbers no longer an advantage, and the Allied fleets immediately pressed forward, pushing back what remained of the enemy, taking advantage of the chaos that Ethan had created with human ingenuity and the bravery of the Warbeast, while ships that had seemed doomed moments ago now found paths to strike back. And through it all, Ethan remained focused, monitoring the battlefield even as the Aegis shuddered and burned, the ship's systems failing one by one. But the swarm's advance halted and their remaining vessels were forced into retreat, leaderless and disorganized. And although victory was close, the cost was immense. Hundreds of ships destroyed, countless lives lost, and the Aegis itself on the verge of collapse. Yet in the aftermath, as silence slowly returned to the stars, it became clear that humanity had done the impossible, facing a foe that had consumed worlds and using courage, intelligence, and the bond between a human and a creature older than most stars. They had struck the first true blow against the darkness, proving that even against overwhelming odds, humans could find solutions, could stand firm, and could survive. And as debris drifted through space, the war beast lowered itself beside the weakened but unbroken Ethan. Both battered but alive, a living symbol of the new hope humanity represented. And for the first time, the galaxy began to realize that humans were no longer just survivors of their damaged homeworld, but a force that could challenge the ancient and the unstoppable. And though battles would come again, the courage and ingenuity displayed in that fight became a story told across systems. A story of a small human who stood firm, a war beast that recognized worth beyond strength or size, and the beginning of humanity's rise as a true player in the war-filled cosmos. After the explosion that shattered the heart of the devouring swarm, silence returned to the stars, heavy and uncertain. As the surviving fleet slowly regrouped, their ships battered and their crews exhausted, the void littered with drifting wreckage and the burned remnants of enemy vessels, and for 3 days no word came from the Aegis or its commander, Ethan Cross, who had been at the center of the blast, and many feared the worst, believing that the human and the war beast had perished in the massive detonation that had turned the dark of space into a temporary white sun. But then a faint signal appeared, weak and irregular at first, a human-coded distress beacon that flickered across comm channels like a pulse of stubborn life. And a rescue fleet was dispatched immediately, navigating through the debris and remains of the battlefield to find the source. And when they finally located Ethan, he was inside an emergency pod, burned and battered, barely conscious, yet alive, and the war beast floated nearby, its body damaged but its breathing steady, both of them a testament to endurance against impossible odds. And as the pod was brought aboard a larger ship and stabilized, word of their survival spread quickly across the fleet, bringing relief and awe to those who had witnessed the battle and those who had only heard tales of the human who had faced the swarm. And when Ethan finally returned to the Galactic Council, the halls were silent, the representatives of countless worlds staring at him and the war beast with a mixture of disbelief and reverence, because they understood what had just happened, that a human, small and unassuming in appearance, had not only survived where entire fleets had fallen, but had also turned a hopeless situation into a victory. And the war beast, the ancient creature that had been a living legend, had recognized in him a strength that transcended size, species, or training, a combination of courage, intelligence, and calm determination that allowed it to bond completely, responding to his commands with perfect synchronicity during the fight. And the council members, who were used to seeing heroes from alien worlds and soldiers bred for war, found themselves in silent acknowledgement that humanity had stepped fully into the galactic stage, no longer a minor player but a force capable of strategic brilliance and remarkable bravery. And while Ethan was quietly recovering from his injuries, the story of that battle, of the human who had faced death and the ancient war beast that had chosen him, spread across the galaxy, becoming legend, inspiring cadets and warriors from countless species to consider the unexpected possibilities of courage and loyalty. And despite the celebrations, there was also solemnity, as the cost of the fight had been enormous, with hundreds of ships destroyed and countless lives lost. Yet the victory proved that humanity's resilience was unmatched, that their ingenuity and will to survive could turn even the direst situation into hope. And as time passed, the war beast returned to its ancient rest, retreating to the deep sectors where it had slept for cycles, but before leaving, it pressed its massive head to Ethan's chest one final time, a gesture of trust, recognition, and an unbreakable bond that would never fade. And Ethan, though exhausted and battered, understood the significance, knowing that his life, and the life of his species, had changed forever, because the galaxy had witnessed humans not as fragile survivors or minor players, but as warriors, thinkers, and leaders capable of standing against threats that had destroyed countless worlds. And whenever new dangers emerged from the darkness beyond, when fleets readied and alarms blared across distant systems, the question that would always arise was simple yet filled with awe and respect: where are the humans? And the answer was known, whispered in strategy rooms, shouted in commands, and written in the hearts of allies and enemies alike. Because wherever humans stood, courage, cleverness, and a determination to survive and overcome were present. And the bond with the war beast became a symbol of this truth, that when the unexpected happens, when the small and underestimated rise to the challenge, they can change the fate of stars. And in that new era, the galaxy remembered one human and one war beast who had faced death together, who had stood against an unstoppable enemy and survived, and who had shown that humanity's place was no longer on the sidelines, but at the center of galactic destiny. A reminder that the universe is wide, ancient, and full of dangers, but it is also full of possibilities for those willing to face the darkness, for those willing to stand when everything seems lost, and for those who refuse to let fear choose for them, because in the end, what the galaxy would never forget was that a human had survived, triumphed, and changed the stars forever.